This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Mali military coup leaders say they want to stay in power for a 3-year transition period. In Cote d'Ivoire, supporters of former President Laurent Gbagbo to file for his candidacy in October's elections. And New Zealand mosque shooter sentenced to life without parole. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta, live in Nairobi. And for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. Let's take a look at other stories making headlines this hour. In business, Nigeria faces a severe foreign currency shortage due to the collapse of crude oil prices. And in sports, South Africa's men's hockey team resumes Olympic preparations. Once again, welcome to Africa Live. So good to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta. Let's begin in Mali, where leaders of the military coup say they want to stay in power for a 3-year transition period. According to the Nigerian presidency, the military junta told a delegation of mediators from the Economic Community of West African States that it needs the transitional period before elections. The negotiators, led by former Nigerian President Goodluck Jonathan, were sent to Mali to discuss a return to civilian rule. ECOWAS, however, says what is acceptable is an interim government for a maximum of 1 year. Meanwhile, France is calling for a quick transition in Mali. Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian has assured the country that during this period, it won't stop its military operations targeting Islamist militants in the Sahel region. All right, for more on this story, let's now cross to Phil Ihaza, who is live in Abuja. Phil, thank you for joining us here on Africa Live. First things first, ECOWAS is clearly taking a hard stance on the junta leaders. Tell us more about this new development.
Oh, thank you, Richard. It's getting even more interesting by the day, the developments in Mali. What we know so far is that indeed the sanctions are hard on the country, and already the country is beginning to feel the brunt of those sanctions. According to the the mutineers, they say that they want those sanctions taken off. That's because already they're feeling the brunt. It's Friday is going to make it 10 days since this coup that has kept everyone on their toes, paying attention to the country, Mali. And so, but of course, the leader of the mediation team, that's former President Goodluck Jonathan, says that's out of his position or the team's position to do so. It requires the entire heads of state of the West African bloc. And of course, only if the military junta agrees to the, concerns as well of the West African bloc. So it's getting hard. There's economic sanctions. All nations surrounding Mali in the West African bloc have been told to stop any form of transactions, business transactions, or with the country, and that's huge because you know that the country is already dealing with a high level of poverty, insecurity, with about 2/3 of the country contained or occupied by insurgents. So the celebrations beginning to, the reality of things on ground are beginning to look very clear to the military junta, and they may, in a couple of days or months, have to, find a middle ground to at least, agree to some of the concerns of ECOWAS, and there just has to be a truce for the country to still stand.
All right, further to what you've just said, Phil, ECOWAS leaders are scheduled to hold a summit on Friday to discuss further steps. What other options does the bloc have?
Well, I'll say yes, indeed. They're supposed to have a meeting on Friday. They've put a lot of options on the table, which we're seeing some kind of results because So the military junta say they want to hold on to power for 3 years, and the ECOWAS say that's not feasible. They're insisting on a 6 months, 9 months, or 12 months maximum time frame to ensure there's a transitional government in place. Of course, the junta have not agreed, but they will have to in the course of events, because with these sanctions still in place.
Well, it appears we've lost our correspondent Philly Haza from Abuja. We apologize for that break in communication. In the meantime, we will move over to Robert Nagila, CGTN's Robert Nagila. He looks at military involvements in government change in Africa over the past decade. Let's take a look.
We begin in Niger in 2010, where soldiers take President Muhammadu Tangier into custody following a year-long political crisis. In Mali in 2012, unhappy with the government's handling of the Tuareg rebellion, the military overthrows the regime of President Amadou Touré. A year later, in 2013, Egyptian Army Chief General Abdel Fattah el-Sisi deposes President Mohamed Morsi from power following countrywide protests. In 2017, Zimbabwe's armed forces under General Constantino Chiwenga placed President Robert Mugabe under house arrest following political unrest. In 2019, following months of nationwide protests, Sudanese soldiers overthrow President Omar al-Bashir, and in August this year, in Mali, President Ibrahim Keita is taken into custody by soldiers following months of anti-government protests. Back to you.
All right, let's turn our attention to Cote d'Ivoire now, where the supporters of former President Laurent Gbagbo say they will file his name for candidacy in the presidential elections this October. The avid supporters have formed a pro-Gbagbo coalition calling themselves, quote, Together for Democracy and Sovereignty, close quote. The move comes following news that Gbagbo was removed from the electoral list. The presidential bid on his behalf could still hold, as the head of the Independent Electoral Commission has asserted that one need not be physically present to file. The former Ivorian leader lives in Europe after being tried by the International Criminal Court and cleared of charges of crimes against humanity for his role in post-election violence in 2010. Gbagbo has not made any public statement about whether he wishes to run again. And to Mauritius now, where the assessment of the full extent of damage from the oil spill is continuing. This comes after at least 17 dolphins were found on the coast of the country. The incident sparked anger among residents and environmentalists over the possible connection to the oil spill by Japanese-owned MV Wakashio. Officials say the dead mammals appeared to have several wounds and blood around their jaws. Other dolphins stranded ashore looked ill and fatigued, according to environmental experts. The Japanese-owned MV Wakashio ran aground about a month ago, prompting the announcement of an environmental emergency. Well, for more on that story, we are joined by CGTN's Lou Feifei, who is live from Mauritius. Lou Feifei, thank you for joining us here on Africa Live. Always a pleasure to speak to you. Well, on a sad note, there are fears that more dolphins could have died. Tell us more about this and the ongoing assessment of the damage caused by the oil spill. Lou Feifei?
Hi, Richard. It's fair to say that Mauritians have taken a collective relief side this morning, a small one, because thus far today, no new dead dolphins or sick dolphins have been reported. Of course, yesterday the reports came in spurts. So while people are relieved that nothing has happened so far, that is not to say that the thing is over. In terms of the cleanup activities continue. As you know, the bow of the ship has been towed and scuttled out to sea in Mauritius waters, and the stern of the boat remains on the reef. A lot of what is happening now is the assessments of the fragile ecosystems in the surrounding areas, and also the cleanup of the coastal areas and the mangroves. And this is going to take a long time to complete.
All right, Lou Feifei, let's talk about the dolphins a little bit more. It's good news that no new dead dolphins have been found. However, experts have examined the carcasses of the dead dolphins. Has the cause of death been established?
Indeed, you're correct. They did have a visual exam, which they reported on yesterday. And according to the experts who examined the dolphins, the official statement is that they did not find any trace that it was related to the oil spill. Having said that, they are waiting for the actual post-mortem examination for scientific evidence to support this finding, this visual finding. And as far as we understand now, 2 of the 18 dolphins have been brought to the Albion Fisheries Research Center, where the post-mortem is an ongoing process. The government has not released any updated information, and we are all anxiously awaiting that. What's happened also is that one of the foremost marine mammal experts from Mauritius, Vitri, has come out and reminded everybody that something very similar happened back in 2015, where 35 dolphins became stranded in just about the exact same location along the southeast coast of Mauritius. His theory is that the dolphins became very confused, possibly due to heavy sonar systems or military activities, and that in fact this is happening around the world, and as a result of their confusion, they ended up in the lagoons.
All right, Lu Fei, let's leave it there for now. Thank you so much for your insight and analysis. Lu Fei speaking to us live from Mauritius. Now, in New Zealand, the man who shot dead 51 Muslim worshippers last year has been sentenced to life in prison without parole. Owen Poland has more from Auckland.
This is the moment New Zealand and the world has been waiting for. And for the first time in New Zealand history, a court has decided that a life sentence for murder actually means just that, life in prison without parole. Before passing his sentence, Justice Cameron Manda described the 29-year-old Australian terrorist, Brenton Tarrant, as a highly dangerous criminal with no regard for human life, after he gunned down 51 worshippers and attempted to murder 40 others who were praying at 2 Christchurch mosques in March 2019. The judge outlined a grim summary of facts about how the killer used the high-powered weapons to systematically shoot worshippers who were praying on the floor. The dead included a 3-year-old boy who was clinging to his father's leg, and the body of one woman who was shot at point-blank range outside a mosque was run over by Tarrant as he tried to escape. Justice Manda also described the unbearable loss that many of the families have suffered, including the lifelong injuries to a 4-year-old girl who's had to undergo 14 operations for brain injuries. The judge said that no child should be subject to such pain and violence. The judge also acknowledged the extraordinary act of humanity that some victims had demonstrated by forgiving the killer, who he described as a deeply impaired person who had delusional beliefs and lacked any remorse. The crimes were so wicked, the judge said he had no choice but to impose the maximum sentence of life without parole to protect the community. And he said if Tarrant's aim was to divide the Muslim community, he'd failed.
Tensions between China and the U.S. have spread to their militaries. Beijing has accused Washington of sending a spy plane into a no-fly zone where China has been holding military drills.
America's U-2 reconnaissance airplane intruded into the no-fly zone in China's northern military region, where the Chinese military was holding live-fire drills. This seriously interferes in China's normal military exercises, violating the China-US Code of Conduct for Maritime and Air Safety as well as international practices. The move could easily have caused an unexpected accident. It is a naked provocation. China is resolutely opposed to it and has already launched stern representations with the US. China demands the US immediately stop this kind of provocative behavior and take practical steps to safeguard peace and stability in the region.
Well, earlier this week, the Wall Street Journal ran a piece titled, quote, "The Pentagon is prepared for China," close quote. U.S. Defense Chief Mark Esper accused the Chinese military of threatening a free and open international system. Zhao dismissed these claims as baseless. He said the Chinese military has taken part in more than 20 UN peacekeeping operations since 1990. It had sent out the most peacekeeping forces among the 5 permanent members of the Security Council. He said, in contrast, in the more than 2 centuries since the U.S. was founded, there were only 16 years when the country was not at war.
美国2019年军费预算
The U.S. military budget stands at $716 billion, which is equivalent to the combined total of 9 countries ranking behind it. Who is the one that owns hundreds of military bases across the world? Who started wars or illegal military operations in Iraq, Syria, Libya, and many other countries, while also showing off its military strength in the sea far away from its own land? And who is the one that entrenched a Cold War mentality, having withdrawn from all sorts of international treaties and freely breaking global rules?
And now to a new fallout from the police shooting of a black man in the United States of Wisconsin, in the U.S. state of Wisconsin. The Attorney General has identified Rustin Shesky as the officer who shot Jacob Blake on Sunday. The shooting has sparked violent protests in the city of Kenosha. A teenager has been charged with first-degree murder after killing 2 people during a 3rd night of protest. BuzzFeed says the teen was seen at a Trump rally in January in Iowa. And the National Basketball Association postponed all playoff games scheduled for Wednesday after the Wisconsin team refused to play in protest. The governor of Wisconsin has declared a state of emergency and will deploy more National Guards in Kenosha. Daniel Williams reports.
The moment 3 nights of protests became deadly. A confrontation between protesters and an armed citizen. 2 people were killed, a 3rd was seriously wounded. Police in neighboring Illinois on Wednesday arrested 17-year-old Kyle Rittenhouse on suspicion of first-degree murder.
We have a person in custody out of state. I'll be working to bring that person to Wisconsin to face appropriate charges.
Tuesday, police used tear gas and rubber bullets to disperse protesters demonstrating for a 3rd straight night. The protests were sparked after police shot an unarmed black man, Jacob Blake, multiple times on Sunday. His family says Blake is now paralyzed from the waist down. Groups, including civil rights leader Jesse Jackson's Rainbow Push organization, are calling on the demonstrations to be peaceful.
We've made some of our greatest gains by public, peaceful protests, without violence, without burning, without looting. The individuals who lost their lives last night and the one that's clinging on, their lives matter too.
The destruction following the protests is clear to see, with businesses left to count the cost. But protesters say their demands have not yet been addressed. Although 2 police officers have been placed on administrative leave, demonstrators say they want more.
We want them fired. And once they're fired, we want them arrested. And once they're arrested, then we want them prosecuted. That is the 3 things that we're asking for. And we will protest every day out here until we get that.
In response to the violence, Wisconsin's Governor Tony Evers says he's sending more National Guards troops to the scene, 500 in all. And President Trump weighed in Wednesday, saying he'll be sending federal law enforcement too. A nightly curfew has been declared in the city until Sunday. Dan Williams for CGTN, Kenosha, Wisconsin.
And the news continues on Africa Live. Here is a look at what's ahead. The Democratic Republic of Congo contains a measles outbreak that has killed more than 7,000 children. Public officers take the front line in the fight against the coronavirus in Tunisia. Nigeria is my home. 160 million vibrant, ambitious individuals constantly seeking the perfect self-expression. It is these people who inspired me to be that person that is seen, to be a voice that is heard, and ultimately to be the anchor that I am. I have to tap in tune in and turn on the very best qualities within me to deliver the news. I'm Richard Nta, an anchor for CGTN. Welcome back to Africa Live. Thanks for staying with us. Health officials in the Democratic Republic of Congo say a measles outbreak, which has ravaged the country since 2018, has been contained. The disease has claimed the lives of more than 7,000 children under the age of 5. CGTN's Chris Ochemringa has more on this story.
The DRC government has been battling the measles outbreak since 2018. The disease claimed more than 7,000 people, most of them children aged under 5. The World Health Organization described it as the largest and fastest moving epidemic in the world. The health minister, Dr. Eteni Longondo, says the outbreak has now been contained. He also said an official declaration will soon be made. The childhood disease was tackled through a widespread vaccination program. The DRC's healthcare system has been blighted by decades of conflict. The country is still battling other epidemics like Ebola, cholera, and the COVID-19 pandemic. Chris Ochemringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
As Zimbabwe's economy continues to face many challenges, some Zimbabweans have shifted to making quarry stones to earn their living. It's work that is usually done by machines, but these men are doing it manually. They find the granite rocks on the outskirts of Harare, crush them into quarry stones, and sell them to communities constructing houses in the area. The demand is high, and many are hopeful that they will continue thriving.
I started this work in 2006. I provide food for my family and send my kids to school through this work.
I managed to acquire a house stand through selling these stones, so it's quite rewarding.
Police in Tunisia are at the forefront in ensuring that the public complies with the coronavirus protocols. These include adherence to movement restrictions, social distancing, and wearing of masks in the public. Thousands of officers are also receiving training in dealing with suspected cases of infection. Adnan Shawashi reports.
Ahmed Belhaj Khalifa is one of the police officers in charge of enforcing the law while ensuring that COVID-19 prevention measures are being respected in Tunisia.
Policemen work 24 hours a day, even during the COVID-19 crisis and lockdown. Enforcing COVID-19 protocols throughout the country is our responsibility. We are willing to die for our country.
Belhaj Khalifa says that working during the coronavirus crisis is one of the most challenging missions in his 30-year career at the Interior Ministry. He says the risk of infection does not deter the Tunisian police force from fulfilling their duty.
We do not hesitate to risk our lives, even if we lack the logistical means. We are dedicated to this mission. All policemen have been trained on infection prevention. They can deal with any suspected case while waiting for the health emergency units.
Many Tunisians assert that it's difficult to adhere to restrictions, especially on public transport, while others acknowledge the challenges that police officers face while dealing with suspected cases.
Policemen are working in difficult conditions. They do not always have the necessary protective gear. I respect their devotion and sacrifice for the country and encourage them.
I respect the law and understand when policemen use force to enforce the COVID-19 protocols. They are trying to protect us, so we must comply with the law. It's a risky job, especially during this unprecedented health crisis.
According to the Ministry of Health and the Office of Aviation and Airports, at least 15 agents, including policemen, have been infected at Tunis Carthage International Airport in recent weeks. Tunisian authorities have conducted large-scale disinfection at all border crossings. The Ministry of Health and the Interior Ministry have imposed a strict health protocol and hygiene measures to tackle the spread of COVID-19 among policemen. Adnan Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
The coronavirus pandemic is threatening not only people's health, but also their livelihoods. In Kenya's Turkana County, many earning daily wages have been struggling to put food on the table. CGTN's Daniel Arap Moy reports.
Julius Were is a tailor in Lodwar, a town in northern Kenya. He is the breadwinner of the family. For Were, the fear of the coronavirus goes hand in hand with anxiety about where his family's next meal is coming from. With no alternative source of income, Were is struggling to feed his children.
I have 6 children waiting for me at home, but there is nothing much I can do. When I get something small, they eat. If I fail, they sleep without food, but we are trying to ensure they survive.
Like Were, many people who once could afford to buy enough food to feed their families now find themselves cutting back on the number of meals they can provide.
We used to depend on our goats for food, but even our goats are dying. And those that are still available are too thin to be slaughtered or sold, and you wonder what else to do.
Now that our children are out of school due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the malaria situation, many of us are struggling. Food has become a real problem. Even these mothers, you see, are struggling to find the very basics to feed themselves and their children.
The dependence on relief food in this county has been very high for so many years of consistent feeding people without actually putting resources into producing food.
Climate change has not made the food situation in Kenya's Turkana any better.
The Turkana people have for many years persevered in an arid landscape, but weather patterns in this part of Kenya is getting ever more erratic due to climate change, putting the Turkana at risk.
We have focused on irrigation, rehabilitating some of the very old irrigation schemes, building others. But of late, the last 2 years is focused on flood-based irrigation, where we will be able to tap irrigated water.
According to the Famine Early Warning Systems Network, food insecurity among pastoral and marginal agricultural areas is expected to be highest in August and September during the lean season. Daniel Arap Moi, CGTN, Turkana, Kenya.
In Nigeria, there are health and safety concerns at play as frontline workers continue their jobs amid the coronavirus pandemic. From security guards to cleaners to sales attendants, their constant interface with people puts them at risk of contracting COVID-19. CGTN's Kelechi Mekalam reports.
This pharmacy in Nigeria's capital has been in operation for nearly a decade. Among its staff of about 45 people, many of them interact daily with customers. Many businesses like this one have measures in place to protect their workers from the coronavirus.
We limited the number of shifts we had. We actually looked at it and make it more flexible. More staff have access to off days as compared to the previous before the COVID period. So they had access to off, and their shift is flexible, and not like before that you have to come to work daily.
We not only took care of their transportation, their movement, we also took care of their feeding, but then there was no place to eat. If a person have to work for 6-7 hours, you have to provide food for the person. You have to provide a lot of comfort for the person, so that in the risk of coming to work with you, the person will be satisfied, happy while going home. And making sure that in as much as he's coming to work for you, he's going back healthy.
There's hand sanitizer, there's face mask. They provide everything we needed for us to be safe. Our office took proper measure. They keep distance. Customers are to keep distance. We have to attend to one customer before we tell the other person to come in.
But what these frontline workers don't have is health insurance cover.
In the country at the moment, the number of employers that actually provide health insurance for their companies are very low, extremely low. It's very, very important because these people end up getting sick while doing their job. Apart from COVID-19, it is a very good, important thing to make available for all your workers.
Despite the risks involved, many workers remain resolute in hanging on to their jobs. Nigeria's current unemployment rate stands at 27.1%, according to the National Bureau of Statistics. And there's been massive job losses and pay cuts since the pandemic hit. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Well, Africa Live continues with our business segment. Here's a peek at the headlines. TikTok boss resigns as the company comes under increasing pressure from the Trump administration. Nigeria faces a severe foreign currency shortage due to the collapse of crude oil prices.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Once again, welcome to Africa Live. Thanks for staying with us. Thanks for tuning in. Well, the chief executive of Chinese-owned video app TikTok says he's resigning from his position. Kevin Mayer made the decision as the company comes under increasing pressure from the Trump administration over its ties to China. Mayer, a former Disney executive who helped launch Disney Plus, took over TikTok in May. Nigeria is facing a severe foreign currency shortage following the collapse in the price of its main export, crude oil. The country's long-held multiple exchange rates and capital controls have compounded the problem as foreign investors find it increasingly difficult to buy U.S. dollars with ease or even move capital out of the country. As CGTN's Deji Badmus reports, there are growing fears that this forex shortage could limit the recovery of Africa's biggest oil producer.
The last time Nigeria experienced the current forex liquidity shortage was in 2016, when the country slipped into recession. With another recession looming, the problem has resurfaced, and the course is not uniquely different from the last time. A fall in oil price, the country's main source of forex earnings, and a drop in remittances flow as a result of global disruptions from the COVID-19 pandemic have both combined to hurt the country's forex revenue. Even foreign investments, too, have been greatly impacted.
The focus in Nigeria, unfortunately, has been with the portfolio investors. And they come in and out, and when the conditions are good, they're in. When the conditions are bad, they're out. But FDI is more calculated, is more focused on the long-term economic growth and development. And clearly, Nigeria is probably doing under $2 billion a year in FDIs.
Nigeria's capital market has been badly hit as a result of the situation, as foreign portfolio investors bid for the gates, seeking alternative markets.
For most of the foreign investors bought the FMDQ OTC futures contract, FX futures contract rather, and it's a Naira non-deliverable forward that they get Naira and they still have to source for their dollars. So what we've been seeing now is that for most of the foreign investors, despite the assurances from the CBN, for most of them have not been able to repatriate their proceeds.
The Central Bank of Nigeria has so far carried out 2 rounds of devaluation as part of its strategy to ease the pressure on the local currency and bring about a single exchange rate for the country. It also added some new items on its list of items banned from accessing forex through the official market. Even banks too have had to ration the sale of forex and review spending limits of customers. But the scarcity still persists, and some analysts say the situation could go on for the next 18 months if oil prices continue to remain low.
So at the point when oil prices are over $100 a barrel, then you should see the Naira appreciate against the dollar. And at a time when oil prices are low, you should see the Naira devalued. But basically, because you have a static exchange rate regime, we've suffered devaluation and we're not seeing that revaluation.
We need to ensure that our foreign exchange policy incentivizes investment, allows or encourages inflow of foreign capital and foreign direct investment. We need to remove the current level of uncertainty around a lot of policy issues.
The National Bureau of Statistics here has just released the GDP figures of the country for the second quarter. Not surprisingly, the economy contracted by 6%. Even though oil continues to account for around 9% of the entire GDP, fact is, if prices do not go up, the entire economy will continue to feel the shock. And of course, the forex challenge will continue to bite harder. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
This month, China's Shenzhen is marking 40 years as a special economic zone. The southern city has been a pioneer in the country's economic reform and opening up. But urbanization and development usually come at an environmental cost. Omar Khan shows us how city planners in China's Silicon Valley have kept that in mind and are ensuring a green and stable environment.
When Shenzhen comes to mind, most people often think of a city like this, a skyline lined with towering buildings within an expanding megacity. But in reality, the tech hub has ample green space. And that's not by chance, as city planners have long maintained a green vision.
Shenzhen has taken a national lead in terms of ecological and environmental protection. This includes resource and spatial planning. Back in 2005, we drew up a standard ecological control line, which were the first among major cities in China.
The Futian Mangrove Ecological Park is one example of Shenzhen's efforts in supporting environmental protection. According to environmentalists, China's mangrove forests, which act as a buffer between land and sea, have been on the decline over the past century. But in the last 2 decades, there's been a reverse in that trend.
The park's main contribution to Shenzhen, the most basic function you could say, is to protect coastal areas. Its other function is to purify cedar and sequester carbon. The park is a good example of ecological preservation here in Shenzhen. When it comes to the rapid development of the city, we take the initiative to control open sprawl, space, and construction.
But how has Shenzhen managed this balancing act of becoming an economic powerhouse while still retaining a lush presence?
It's precisely because of our ecological control measures that there is self-restraint when it comes to the development of Shenzhen. All industries and enterprises are limited to the land they can occupy, including high energy and water consumption. We are focused on innovating and improving how we go about industrial development.
It's not an easy task managing the environment, living space for residents, and continuing Shenzhen's robust economy. But even for scenic tourist locations like Wutong Mountain, ensuring the preservation of the natural habitat is priority number one.
Wutong Mountain is quite significant given that it's a primitive and natural forest that extends all the way to Hong Kong. It's Shenzhen's most important wildlife resource and accounts for nearly 80% of all natural resources. So from an ecological protection point of view, it's vital to the habitat and environment.
Having seen 40 years of remarkable economic growth, the question for the future is if Shenzhen can keep moving forward, all whilst maintaining its natural beauty. Omar Khan, CGTN, Shenzhen.
And to the U.S. now, and there's one industry that's been booming despite the pandemic and protests across America, and that's the gun retailers. Gun shops and shooting ranges say they've experienced a surge in business in recent months. CGTN's Dan Williams reports.
Gun owner takes aim at a shooting range on the outskirts of Chicago. This shooting range and gun shop has enjoyed brisk business of late amid the COVID-19 pandemic and the recent nationwide racial justice protests.
They came in like gangbusters and started buying up everything.
Tom Dorsch is the director of operations at On Target Range. He says he's seen an increase in sales across the board, including a significant number of first-time buyers.
It hit us like a sucker punch. All of a sudden it was a Friday and it seems like the zeitgeist was at work in the minds of Americans, and they said it's time to protect ourselves. If they already had guns, they wanted more ammunition. If they didn't have a gun or ammunition, they were here for that.
According to local reports, between mid-March and early May, there was a near 60% rise in background checks compared to the same period last year in Illinois, suggesting a major uptick in new gun owners. Management at this shooting range and gun shop say they are still working to restock supplies following the initial rush that occurred at the beginning of the pandemic. And for first-time buyers, staff here strongly suggest they undertake a course or a series of lessons.
I just do that same malfunction drill. Finger outside the trigger, tap that.
This is one of the concealed carry classes. Organisers say since the pandemic began, their courses fill up as quickly as they offer them.
We just started offering another class that we found was wildly popular. It's called How to Defend Your Home or Tactical Home Defense. And once again, we tried to fill a need because we know that a lot of people are thinking about it. If a lot of folks, bad guys perhaps are out of work or looking for an easy score, they're going to go into someone's home. We filled that class in about 24 hours.
Gun shops and shooting ranges were deemed an essential service shortly after the lockdown began. Those who attended this class say they understand the fresh demand.
A lot of times what motivates people isn't what's actually going to happen, but they have fear.
The world's in a weird spot right now. So I don't know if I'll ever actually carry it, but I want the option to carry my firearm with me to defend myself and my family should the need ever arise.
But the surge in demand has created a major strain in processing firearm owner identification cards. A backlog, it appears, that continues to build. Dan Williams, CGTN, Crystal Lake, Illinois.
Now, over 90% of Egypt's jasmine fields are located in the Garbia Governorate. The fields, which cover around 1,000 acres, are fed by the mineral-rich waters of the Nile just before the river reaches the Mediterranean Sea. The country's jasmine farmers pick about 20 tons of the scented plant every day. CGTN's Alexandria Majala has the rest of that story.
Egypt's Garbia region is the heartland of its jasmine harvest. According to international trade figures, the aromatic oils extracted for perfumes from here make up over half of the global supply.
We learned to harvest since we were young, and this profession needs attention and quick hands because we only reap the small blooming flowers.
During the harvest season, picking begins around midnight and ends a few hours after dawn each day. A tough job, but a hard-working picker can harvest as much as 5 kilograms or 11 pounds of petals a day. While it is cooler to work after dark, the key reason harvesting is done at night is because it is only then that the flowers fully open.
Egypt's jasmine production in the season, which starts in June until November, is around 5 tons of jasmine.
According to the International Federation of Essential Oils and Aroma Trades, Egypt and India dominate the production of jasmine extract for perfumes, making up around 95% of supply. Jasmine trade is estimated to pull in some $6.5 million annually for Egypt, providing income to around 50,000 people.
There are some competitors to Egypt in jasmine production, such as India and Tunisia. That's why we are trying to produce the best quality we have.
The Fakhri Essential Oils factory handles around 70% of the region's floral production. They compress and grind the delicate blossoms down. From that paste, the precious scented oils can be extracted by distillation. From all those flowers, some 5 tons of dense jasmine paste is finally produced each year. Egyptian farmers have long complained that the low production costs of their big rival India drive their prices down. But the economic impact of the novel coronavirus pandemic has been harder still, with demand dropping sharply. Alexandria Majala for CGTN.
And we are not done just yet. We will see you on the other side of the break with more stories. Don't go away.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes.
Vikash Purma is a scuba diving instructor on the island of Mauritius.
When you go underwater, you are living the actual moment. Because when you're down there, you're not in contact with whatever trouble you've got, whatever is there.
He is a popular teacher with locals, as well as with international visitors. For Vikash, the underwater world is a place where everyone is equal. Yet he finds that society itself is not always perfect.
No one is better than A, B, or C. I don't say that's one. I say that's the reality.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back to Africa Live. And now to our continuing digital safari series. Today we take a look at the Mara Prides, taking a break from hunting as a coalition of cheetahs prepare to head out for a kill.
Yesterday on CGTN's Digital Safari. In Juma, we were greeted by Cote and her tiny cub as our morning began. Even at this early age, this mischievous tyke is compelled to St. Mark. Eventually, they'll get the hang of it. Dylan got a huge surprise in Swalu as he found a coalition of cheetahs grabbing a quick drink before moving on to look for their next meal. Life was breezy by the Mara River. Hippos and their young were escaping the heat, swimming in the crisp waters. Even a couple of banded mongoose came down to see what all the fuss was about. Elsewhere in the Masai Mara, the Owino Pride were taking a break from hunting prey. The cubs practiced stalking around an old termite mound, while the elders soaked up the sun's rays. The majestic male Olohashe made a grand entrance to join his pride on their day off. The lions in Ngala were also nurturing their cubs, lazing on the banks of the waterhole, occasionally getting up to drink. As the heat of the day increased, so did the activity around the dam. A hodgepodge of wary travelers visited the banks of the waterhole, always keeping an eye on the Birmingham Pride catnapping nearby. A giraffe awkwardly drinking with their legs splayed is always a sight to behold. Back in Juma, Trish tracked down our buffalo, who seemed to be integrating well with the elephant herd. It has been reported that this buffalo has been following these elephants for the last 5 days. Join us every day at 4:30 GMT on CGTN digital platforms for your very own virtual safari through the African wild.
We've got your sports news coming up after the break. Here's a peek at the headline.